Hi again then guys, and welcome to another look back into the past of the Forza franchise, to Forza 2 in particular, to a car which is, I would say, very easy to overlook in the dealerships, and it's one which, to be honest, I hoped would be better than when I first drove it back in the day, because the car which it's based on, which is pretty obvious, an Evo, has so much potential to work with. Now, it's of course a Mitsubishi Evo VIII underneath, but the car in particular is the Sparco Evo. Now, I've mentioned before in the past on certain aftermarket tuner episodes of this series that there are definitely some aftermarket cars which feel like fan service. They are alternative versions of widely loved cars which are included in the game not because they're necessarily better, especially ultimately because the road car can often be tuned to be better than these, but more so because it gives fans of the car something else to play with. And that feels like the case here, to be honest, because it's not a bad car, not at all in fact, it's actually a really good one in some ways. It's just a little underwhelming compared to what its numbers would suggest, because of course in the real world, the Mitsubishi Evo VIII is a great performance car, and there's one in particular which is an absolute monster, which goes by the name of FQ400, which is a legend for a reason. That car can actually do around 175 miles per hour, hit 60 in 3.5 seconds. It's a four-door supercar, essentially. It's not, but you know what I mean. So with that in mind, this has 450 horsepower, and it weighs only 1,315 kilos. So what kind of absolute beast could this thing be? Well, unfortunately, it's not that it's not a beast, it's that it feels like an underwhelming one, especially compared to what you'd assume a car like this could do. It looks the part, the Evo already is the part, so when you're charging 202,000 credits, which is a whole lot for an aftermarket car like this, you understandably expect a lot from it. So what do you actually get? Well, as I alluded to, you're looking at 450 horsepower, which is decent enough. 411 pound-feet of torque is also nothing to be sniffed at, and neither is the 1,315 kilo curb weight. Those are all very respectable. It retains all-wheel drive, the horsepower per tonne is 342, and even the category seems potentially quite useful at A797. So what went wrong? Well, it's kind of difficult to pin that down because it's not a bad car in any particular way. The acceleration is pretty good, the top end speed is okay, you wouldn't expect it to be crazy good for an Evo anyway, but it's good enough. The handling is supremely beginner friendly, it's such a forgiving car, which the FQ400 is to some degree, but not necessarily as much as this one. So what is wrong with it? Well, that's the weird thing, and maybe it is just me, but there's nothing in particular that is wrong with it. It just feels very underwhelming for a car that costs so much, and it really does cost a lot. Now, I can't recall if you can win it or not, but if you do choose to buy it, or either way, to be honest, win it anyway, it still feels underwhelming even if you haven't paid 200 grand for it, because a car like this should be better than it is, especially given, and this is the crucial thing, the rivals which it's going up against. The aftermarket tuner scene on Forza 2 is a very, very competitive one. There are more aftermarket tuner cars on Forza 2 than we have ever had on any other Forza game. Literally, there are tons of them, from Honda, Toyota, Mazda, Nissan, Mitsubishi, even Subaru models from companies like Tonne. So it's a very, very competitive market, and when you've got companies in there like, not just the obvious ones of Mines or Top Secret, which have been kept through the franchise, but also ones which petered out, like Veilside, or AB Flug, or Goldstrand, or Lingenfelter. These are not featherweight brands, they are big players in the aftermarket scene, and I'm not just talking Japanese imports, I'm talking muscle, supercars, sports cars, all that kind of stuff. They are serious machines, so for a car like this to come in on that scene and to make any kind of decent footprint, it needs to be good, it needs to stand out, because it doesn't have the luxury afforded to it that something like a Tom's MR2 would have, because nobody expects much from a Tom's MR2 except for a fan of the car, whereas for an Evo, even if you're not a fan of it, you have certain expectations going into it already. So this one has been tuned already by an established company, so surely it's going to be mind-blowing, at least really competitive around a track. Now, it is competitive to some degree. It can certainly win races, in career mode especially, but it just doesn't feel as good as it should. It's a very, very underwhelming car, and even if you compare it to what you could say is a rival for it, not directly, but to some degree, the Tomicaira Subaru, which I mentioned earlier, the M20B Impreza. That car is also based on a similar setup vehicle, and yet that one is a lot of fun to drive. It has great handling, but is also playful. Now, I prefer the Evo. Despite the fact that I'm bigging up the Impreza more, I am more of an Evo fan than an Impreza fan, and yet I have to say that the Subaru feels better. That's the simple fact. This is not a bad car, not by any means, and if you tune it, you could potentially get it to be a bit better in terms of excitement, but it's still a car which I would recommend checking out. I'm not hating on the car, it's not a bad car in any particular way, it's just a car which you need to have very, very measured expectations going into because of how good or how high the precedent has already been set by Mitsubishi themselves, almost to the point where this car feels, and this is the real clincher, unnecessary. It feels like a wasted opportunity of an aftermarket car. If you're going to make an extreme Evo, then go all in. Don't give it 450 horsepower, which is barely more than the FQ400 would end up with anyway. So it's just a squandered opportunity, and that's kind of a shame. Not a bad car, handles kind of like a touring car, performance is similar to something like, well, a lightly tuned Evo, literally. So check it out if you get the chance, but if you can win it, as I said, I can't recall, but if you can, then sure, try to win it. If I remember correctly, I think you can actually win it relatively early on, but I may be wrong there. But if you do have to buy it, don't. Not unless you've got loads of money lying around and you just want to try something new. So unfortunately, not quite a glowing review as we would usually have, but at the same time, a car which does definitely deserve to be reviewed because it is still a unicorn, and I do believe that some people will genuinely like this car. You may even disagree with my entire review and love the car. That's great. If someone feels that way, I would be happy, because it would mean that the car has that kind of merit. For me personally though, it was a little bit of a disappointment. Overall then, that's it for this particular pick. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.